Summer Suite group. Your piece has lots of syncopation in it, and the rhythm can be one of the most challenging things that we have to deal with. We want to talk through a couple of the rhythmic things that come up throughout this piece, maybe break them down a little bit, and give you some tips on how to practice them more effectively. First thing we need to discuss is dots, dotted rhythms in general. So take a look at your Summer Suite rhythm examples, and in the first measure you'll see a dotted quarter note, an eighth note tied to a half note. Let's discuss first that dotted quarter note. So remember that a dot will add half the length of the note that precedes it. So we often see dotted half notes, which we'll get to in just a moment. And in a dotted half note, we add one beat because half of a half note is one. In the case of this dotted quarter note, we need to add half of quarter note's one beat, so we add half a beat. So a dotted quarter note gets 1.5 beats, not 2 or 3 or something like that. 1.5 beats. We can rewrite that dotted rhythm just like the rhythm in measure 2. And so if we were to count measure 1, it would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and. Notice that the and is on the beat of 2. So 1, 2, and. See that there in measure 2, a tie from beat 1 to beat 2, and then you can see the and of 2 a little bit more clearly. To practice this, conduct along. Our 4 conducting pattern is down, in, out, up. I'll give you 4 beats to conduct, and then we'll speak the rhythm together. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, and. Again, 1, and. Pretty simple, but can be confusing to look at initially for sure. So practice these 2 measures and then go through in your music and make sure to annotate each measure where this comes up so that you don't get tripped up. Let's move on to our dotted half note example. Dotted half note might be a little bit more familiar to us at this point. Again, the dot adds half the length of the note that precedes it. So our half note gets 2 beats, and so we'll add half of that, 1 more beat. And so that half note will get 3 beats. Best way to think about it is a half note tied to a quarter note. You can see in measure 3, I have my dotted half note, and then in measure 4 of the rhythm examples, I have exactly that, a half note tied to a quarter note. So again, to count that, we would just say 1, 4, and. Hold through all 3 beats. Practice that along with me, conducting along. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 4, and again. 4, and. 1, 2, 3, 4, and. 1, 2, 3, 4, and. Very nice. Very nice. Let's have one final example where our dotted note is going to appear a little bit further in the measure. Take a look at measure 5. And this might be a really good one for us to play together. So measure 5 comes from the guitar 3 part. And the guitar 3 part's in drop D, but don't worry about it. You can still just play an F sharp there. Notice measure 5 has the dotted rhythm. It might be a little bit easier to look at measure 6 that has that same rhythm, just notated as a tie. So the rhythm sounds like this, and 2 and 3 and 2 and 3 and. So conduct along with me first. 1, 2, ready, go. And 2 and 3 and 2 and 3 and. The tendency here will be to not hold the note all the way through beat 4, which would cause us to be early to the next measure, something that we want to avoid. So playing this example would sound like this. 1, 2, ready, and 1, 2, ready, and rest. 4, 1. So making sure that we hold through beat 4 and get to beat 1 is really important. Thing that we need to make sure that we know really well are our tied notes. We need to make sure that anytime that we see a tie, that we are thinking still the note that is tied to. So if we see a tie, for example, in measures 7 and 8 here in our rhythm example, you'll see the and of 4 tied to 1, and then the and of 1 in measure 8 tied to beat 2. So we would not articulate beat 1 or beat 2 of measure 8 in this case, but we still need to make sure that we are giving them their full length and that we're not skipping over those sections. So an easy way to count this initially is to count it without the ties. Let's try that one time. Measure 7 and 8, conduct along with me, and we'll count it without the ties. It'll sound like this. 1, 2, ready, and 1, 4, and 1, and 2, 3, rest. And then adding the ties back in, we still want to give the length there, but we want to make sure that we don't articulate. So it would sound like this. This is with the ties this time. Conduct along. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 4, and rest. One more time with the ties. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 4, and rest. So if we're not careful to include the length that's designated by the ties, we might find ourselves rushing, skipping beats, getting places early. Let's use another example that has quite a bit of syncopation in it. This comes again from the guitar 3 part. Take a look at measures 9 and 10 in the rhythm example. So this is a syncopation across 2 measures. Again, you can see, and counting 9 and 10 just as it is would sound like this. 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 4 E and. Now, like I said previously, the easiest way to get this kind of in our heads initially is to count it without any ties. So take a look at measures 11 and 12 in our rhythm example, and it's all just a bunch of 8th notes until we get to beat 4 of measure 12, and then we have a couple of 16th notes. And I've left all the slurs, all the hammer-ons, in here. So let's just count along all the way through 11 and 12. So conduct along with me. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 E and. Right? So overall, not incredibly complicated without the ties. The trick will be to put the ties back in and skip those notes. One other thing that we can do to begin to make this more accessible to us is practice without the ties. And so we'll just practice really slowly playing measures 11 and 12, and we'll articulate everything. It'll sound like this. So a bunch of 8th notes. Let's try that one more time. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and then we just sort of ghost, or we miss those notes with the right hand, and we get the rhythm that's desired here in measures 9 and 10. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. We just are holding some of those notes a little bit longer, but we're still thinking all of those beats that we're holding and tying to. Really important. A whole bunch of 16th notes, and I want to make sure that we're really clear on 16th notes. These are an integral part of our playing in general. We'll always see quite a few 16th notes in a lot of the music that we do. So just remember that 16th notes are notes that sit in between our 8th notes. So if we have 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, 16th notes include the 8th notes, and they add notes in between. And so we would count it like this. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a. 16th notes, in essence, are dividing each beat into 4 equal parts. Take a look at measure 13 in the rhythm example, and you'll see that on an open B string, we have just a measure to kind of get in the habit of playing things in between. So we'll play 1 and 2 and 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 and 2 and 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 and 2 and 3 E and a, 4 E and a. That'll help help you practice. One other thing that'll help you practice is if we alternate a bunch, we know that the 16th notes will probably need to be I, M, I, M. And if we play our 8th notes, I, it's really easy to just keep the index finger kind of bouncing along in the 8th note and then add the 16th note with our middle finger. So let me demonstrate with just my right hand. It could go like this. 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 and 2 and 3 E and a 4 E and a. It's a good way to practice, to just sort of get the hands ready to play these 16th notes. Another thing that can happen is we don't have a string of 4 16th notes, rather we have 2 16th notes mixed in with 1 8th note. So remember that 2 16th notes will always add up to 1 8th note, and so you'll see in measure 14 two really common versions of this, and it's the two versions that we're going to see the most in this piece. The first is 2 16th notes and then 1 8th note, and we would count it like this: 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 E and, 4 E and. If we just had a string of 4 of them in a row, again it would be 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 E and, 4 E and. So we're just putting one extra 16th note in before the second 8th note. The inverse of that would be an 8th note and then 2 16th notes, where we add a 16th note after the and. And so that would sound like this: 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a, if we just had a string of those all together. So notice that measure 14 has each of those side by side. Measure 14 counted sounds like this: 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 and a 4 and a. Count that one more time with me. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 and a 4 and a. And so I recommend that you just play that right hand alone, just on an open B, and really start to get the right hand familiar with that. So it would sound like this: ready, go. Again, go. Now we can start to see some examples from our music that have these 16th notes in it. Take a look at measure 15, and you'll see we have 2 16th notes. We need to make sure, however, that we place those 16th notes in the correct part of the measure. We know which beat it's in, and then which half. Is it on the first half or the second half of the beat? So to help us with this, I've taken the dot out and added a tie so that we can see beat 2 really clearly. Those 16th notes are going to be inside of beat 2, and they're going to be on the back half of beat 2. So take a look closely at measure 16 for me, and you'll see this rhythm: 1 and a 3 and. Again, it sounds like this: 1, 2, and a 3 and, rest. So go ahead and do your best to play that with me really quick. I'm going to demonstrate it a couple of times. So here is measure, it's the same rhythm both times, so either measure 15 or measure 16. Again, ready, go. Counting along this time: 1, 2, and a 3 and, rest. So not super complicated to play, but it's very important that we know exactly where each of these notes goes within the measure. We don't either add beats, half beats, or subtract beats or half beats. Something like that could be kind of detrimental. Let's see another example of this very similarly, where we'll see notes, 16th notes on the back half of the beat and 16th notes on the front half of the beat. Look at measures 17 and 18 in our rhythm example. Measure 17 sounds like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, and a 3, 4 E and. So in beat 4, those 16th notes come up on the front half of the beat. Remember that we count that 4 E and. So count measure 17 with me: 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and a 3, 4 E and. Again, 2, ready, go. 1 and a 3, 4 E and. And then to play that would sound like this: 1, 2, ready, go. Again, 2, ready, go. One easy way to sort of slow this down just a little bit for yourself will be to take a look at measure 18 And again, play that measure without the tie. So we would get 1, 2, and a 3, 4 E and. 1, 2, and a 3, 4 E and. Our final rhythmic cell that we need to contend with here is triplets. So triplets, instead of dividing the beat into either 2 halves or 4 equal parts, triplets are going to divide the beat into 3 equal parts. And so taking a look at measure 19 of our rhythmic example, let's just go ahead and count a string of 4 triplets. It would sound like this: 2, ready, and triplet, 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 triplet. An easy way to add a number into that would be 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Let's do that one more time. Ready, go. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. So we want to make sure that we are dividing the beats equally and we're not getting 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, or something like that, or slowing down. So the best way to practice this would be to use a metronome to make sure that your beat is really steady. Another great way would be to walk around and just clap triplets. So the next thing that we need to do, that we have to do often in this piece, is switch from eighth notes to triplets within the same measure. So take a look at measure 20 of our rhythm example, and you'll see 1 and 2 and 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Now this switch back and forth can be really tough. Let's practice it a couple of times. Ready, go. 1 and 2 and 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 and 2 and 3 triplet, 4 triplet, 1 and 2 and 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Notice that the eighth notes are coming just a little bit slower than our triplets are. One of the tendencies that we'll have is to not hit that speed right on, and to either go a little bit too slow or a little bit too fast on one division or the other. Some things to keep in mind here are keep the big beat, the 1, 2, 3, 4, really steady and really clear in your mind, and then practicing measure 20 while you're walking around so that you can feel those big beats really clearly and clap along. So we would clap 1 and 2 and triplet, 1 and 2 and triplet as we're walking is really helpful. It's a really good way to just get this internalized really quickly. From the triplets, we have to play not eighth note triplets, but quarter note triplets. So eighth note triplets are the version that we've been talking about so far. It's when we divide one beat into 3 equal parts. Quarter note triplets are when we divide 2 beats into 3 equal parts. We can think about it like tying every other triplet together. So notice in measure 21, I have a string of eighth note triplets, and then I have every one tied to the next one. And so you'll see that this sort of divides the measure into 2 halves with 6 notes in one half, 6 notes in the other half, but we'll only hear 3 beats in the first half and 3 beats in the second half. A really easy way to count this is to keep our triplet subdivision like triplet, 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 and accent every other one. It would sound like this. Triplet, 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 triplet. When we pull the ties out, you get a measure that looks like measure 22, where we just write it using quarter notes. And so here you'll only see 6 beats. And then we start to hear something that sounds like this. Triplet, 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 bump, 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 bump. So these quarter note triplets can be really difficult, and it's very easy to play this rhythm slightly off if we're not subdividing the triplet in our mind. So when you play measures like measure 22 or rhythms that have this quarter note triplet in it, I want you to think the eighth note triplet underneath. So take a look at measure 23, and we'll see our eighth notes going to tied eighth note triplets. So that'll sound like this. 1 and 2 and triplet, triplet. Again, it would be ready and 1 and 2 and triplet, triplet. And so taking the subdivision out, we get our final measure here, and that would sound like this. 1 and 2 and triplet, 1 and 2 and triplet, 1 and 2 and triplet. And that rhythm is the rhythm that we see pretty close to the beginning of our piece starting in measure 5 from guitars 1 and 2. It's very important rhythm for this piece.